Dr. Heather Weiss is the founder and director of the Harvard Family Research Project and is a senior research associate and lecturer at Harvard Graduate School of Education. Dr. Weiss received her doctorate of education in social policy from Harvard Graduate School of Education, and she was postdoctoral research fellow at the Yale Bush Center in Child Development and Social Policy. Her latest publications include several articles reporting on her longitudinal study and ways in which family involvement in children's learning promotes the development and school success.
Thank you very much for the privilege of testifying before you this morning. I want my remarks to sort of talk about some of the research evidence that then frames what you're going to hear from other very important members of this panel, and that's families and people who provide home visit services. I have a long-term interest in home visitation because of its capacity to help parents get the knowledge and skills and support they need to help their children succeed. I'm here because, as a researcher who created the Harvard Family Research Project, I know the 40 years of research that shows that parenting and family processes are one of, if not the strongest predictor of kids' development and school and life success. They are the strongest predictors, I think, of cognitive, social, and emotional development, and therefore a very powerful source of improving outcomes for kids. I know from recent reviews that I've done with colleagues that children and youth with involved and supportive and nurturing parents from birth through adolescence are likely to succeed in school. They're going to be ready for school, succeed in school. They're more likely to get better grades. They're more likely to graduate from high school. And, good morning. And also, they're more likely to go to college or have some kind of post-secondary success. So what potentially home visits in the early years do is set a pathway of parent involvement that begins at birth and continues through school. And when you create that pathway, you increase the likelihood of the long-term benefits we want for kids. And that's high school graduation with the skills they need to succeed in college or post-secondary education, and then in a global economy and world. So this sounds great. What do we know from research about whether or not voluntary early childhood home visitation is a good public policy investment? I look at this through the lens of three questions. What's the evidence that home visiting creates positive changes in parenting that results in better outcomes for children and families? What's the evidence that the home visiting field is ready to scale up and that it will produce these positive outcomes at scale? This is a big public policy investment. What does the research tell us about whether or not we're going to get payback at scale? And finally, what legislation and policy provisions are likely to support successful scale-up so you get these substantial returns on investments? And as a researcher, I of course look closely at legislation and say, does this legislation incorporate what I think research tells us that increases the likelihood of getting benefits at scale? So I want to address these questions. I address them actually in my written testimony in detail. I'm going to talk about them kind of in the Cliff Notes version today, and then I'm happy to answer questions. I'm really here to strongly support the Education Begins at Home Act because there is a strong and growing knowledge base of evaluation evidence that high-quality, voluntary early childhood home visit programs pay off on a variety of outcomes. They develop parenting skills and knowledge and understanding of the key roles that parents play in kids' learning and development. There's a lot of short-term evidence to this effect, and which I've summarized in gruesome detail and probably put many people to sleep with, and I'm happy to talk about it, believe me, but yeah, I think you can make a strong evidence-based case that investment in high-quality programs pays off across an array of outcomes. A thing that's of particular interest to me is the fact that we're now getting longitudinal evidence that shows that these programs have the potential to increase parent involvement into elementary school, meaning that parents are more likely to go to parent-teacher conferences, initiate contact with their teachers about how the child is doing. And as somebody who knows the parent involvement in school and learning at home literature, if you can create that kind of changed parenting behavior that endures through elementary and into high school and beyond, you've got a real recipe for long-term positive outcomes for kids. The evidence also tells us a great deal about how to develop and implement high-quality programs. And this knowledge, I would argue, is critical for the success of investments at scale. We know a great deal about what it takes to get high-quality home visit programs, and I want to talk about that in a minute. So when I think about it, there's bottom line potential, great bottom line potential for home visits to return very important positive outcomes in the early years and well into elementary school and perhaps beyond. These outcomes are things like increased school readiness and school success, prevention of costly problems from maltreatment to teenage substance abuse, delinquency, those kinds of problems. We're beginning to have some evidence of those kinds of benefits with longitudinal research. So I support EBA because of the way, finally, the key features about what we know, about what we need to produce and implement high-quality programs maps directly onto key provisions of the legislation. The research tells us that high-quality home visit programs are necessary but not sufficient. They need to be part of a broader set of early childhood services, including center-based early care and education, and they need to be connected to other supports and resources in the community. The legislation provides for training, curriculum development, and I think incredibly importantly, for external evaluation and ongoing performance management. It requires that states and programs report yearly on key indicators. They can then use the information they get from their performance management to increase their performance. So when I think about what makes for high quality investments in public policy, EBA has strong research behind it, research that helps us understand how to deliver quality programs, and the capacity to track our performance and see if we're getting return on investment. Thank you.
Thank you.